We acknowledge and respect the first humans of the unceded land we call San Francisco, the Ramaytush Ohlone. We condemn the genocide of these and other tribes across the Western Hemisphere. We honor their legacy and history, and we support rematriation and sovereignty efforts. Hello, and welcome to Storied San Francisco. I'm your host, Jeff Hunt. This episode is all about Other Avenues Grocery Cooperative. It'll be the first in a little series we've wanted to do for some time now on San Francisco co-ops. I had the pleasure of sitting down and talking with Celia LoBuono Gonzalez, one of about 18 worker owners at Other Avenues, which is located at 3930 Judah in the Outer Sunset. My conversation with Celia is one of my favorites in a while, not only for this podcast, but just in life. This is part 1 of 2 with Other Avenues. Here's Celia.
I'm Celia LoBuono Gonzalez, and I'm a worker owner at Other Avenues.
Let's just start quickly with your story, where
Sure.
you're from.
Yeah.
How long you've been involved here?
Definitely.
Kind of thing.
Well, I'm from the city, actually. I was born here. I moved to Davis, California when I was 8 years old.
Okay.
And then when I turned 18, I moved back to San Francisco because this is where my heart is. And went to college at SF State.
Okay.
And I studied geography with an emphasis in food systems and also communications.
Well, okay.
Different than communications, but overlapping in many ways.
Got
I did
it.
participate in the radio program at SF State because my friend was doing the class. So that was
I have
fun
to
too.
ask when you were there, because I went as well.
I was there for a while, 2011 to 2017.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's not unusual.
Yeah,
I don't
no,
think you
definitely
should-
not.
yeah.
And I was in student government, and I was like a big student organizer, and I did
Nice.
a lot of different campaigning on food system issues there. Like stopping Pepsi and Coke from coming to campus and becoming a pouring rights school, and just like overall looking at the food system on campus.
Nice.
Before I was like organizing at SF State, I also was leading the March Against Monsanto in San Francisco. So
Thank you for that.
Yeah, traced, food system issues probably starting in 2013 or 2012 or 2013 is when I really started getting involved.
Okay.
And it led me all the way to here, which is exciting, and a number of other things that I'm also involved in. But once I was kind of done at SF State, I lived in the neighborhood, and I shopped here, not like all the time, but
Not exclusively.
Yeah.
Okay.
And my partner saw that they were hiring, and I was like, well, sure, let's do it. So I applied, and they called me back within like 5 minutes.
Oh, nice.
And so I went through the interview process. And then
What year was that?
2018, I believe.
18, so you've been here about 4 years.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, It's hard to
Awesome.
tell the pandemic and everything. Time is so weird. But
Correct.
But yes, since 2018, I think since the summer of 2018.
Can I ask what brought your family to Davis? Because I feel like this could be part of your story.
Sure. Well, it was more so that my mom was working for Caltrans in Oakland.
okay.
And she was over it, and then she decided to try like a private sector job. And so it was in Sacramento, and so we moved to Davis. Of course, then the economy like went down, and that company went out of business, and so we basically moved to Davis for nothing because she went back to work in Caltrans in Oakland. But I also appreciate my time there. I actually started working at the farmers market when I was like in high school, and so that also really got me into the food system, and I through those working there at a bakery, I also got a job working for the Bolani folks that allowed me to move to San Francisco, get a job immediately through my food system connection. So
So it is a big part of your story, Davis, but not necessarily, or not directly the school. That's what I was thinking.
Yeah.
But, okay.
Yeah. No, I just went to like part of elementary school, middle school, and high school there.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. But as you definitely described, I would say thinking about food systems and foodways and all this, from the soil all the way to the market has been part of your life for
Most
a while.
Definitely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I've learned so much, like in different spaces, you know, that's all been weaved together. And so it was really cool to be able to get a job here and sort of apply, you know, have the agency and to apply all of that knowledge, my food system knowledge, also like community, you know, engagement. And yeah, it's been really cool. It's, you know, definitely a challenge here as well, just dealing with the food system through like a very small corner of the of the world, but really
the edge
enlightening.
of the world.
Yeah,
literally. Yeah.
The other avenues of the world.
Right. So you said you already kind of shopped here a little bit. How much of the history of the place did you already know before you started?
Right. Yeah. I actually did not know the history of this place until I was applying and did my research.
Okay.
I knew that it was worker owned, but I hadn't necessarily engaged with co-ops, worker owned co-ops, really intimately until nearing the end of my time at SFC. I also got connected with COFED, the Cooperative Empowerment Food Directive.
Okay.
And they did like a co-op summer institute for 8 days where we, huddled with a lot of cool folks and talk about, radical economies and racial justice and like alternative worker models, such as worker-owned co-ops. And the idea with that,
all connected.
Yeah, exactly.
If you look, it's all connected, right?
Yeah. And so we did a field trip to Other Avenues, which was funny because then, not too many months later, I ended up
here you are. You're like, I can't get away.
Yeah.
No, but I think that does speak to sort of your story and how it evolved and here you are. So how did it come, or how did it happen that you were the person who, when we just kind of like cast a net out, and that you responded? Like, do you have a specific role here? Does anyone have specific roles? Or?
No, I mean, well, yes and no. So we have, we all share pretty much in everything, right? We share in the shift work, so everyone has, some kind of role, like on the floor, cashiering or restocking or, taking turns running the retail floor. We all have roles in buying as buyers for different departments. Okay. But we're all in different departments. Some departments have more than one buyer, some are like two, right. And then we also share in administrative work. I am starting to do payroll now. I do a lot of the, the promo stuff, the marketing, the billboards. And there's different committees we have. We have like a DI committee, we have like a refrigeration committee, store improvements, like a lot of different things. So everyone shares in that as well, and whatever they feel called to. Okay. But I have been excited too by events and, promoting co-ops and talking to people about co-ops and, what kind of resource or tool they have to offer. Shanta Nimbark-Sakharov, who maybe you've heard of, she is like a big part of Other Avenues. She no longer works here, but she visits us and cooks us meals. And,
nice.
She is like a legacy of Other Avenues. Okay. And so I've... become really close with her and learned a lot from her. And her and I have participated in doing different events, talking about Other Avenues, talking about co-ops in the Bay Area. We recently did a little workshop with the SF Public Library and the Oakland Public Library. Nice. So now that the pandemic is like still around, but
doing something.
It's hovering, but with a little bit of more space, we've been a little more active and kicked up also our community events here at Other Avenues. We started doing some in-person activities.
Cool. We can talk about that later. Yeah. So can you sort of go over the history of this place? I know it dates back, almost a half a century now. Yeah. It's slightly younger than I am. But, it's not like this place just kind of popped up overnight. No. Or it's definitely here now. And also, congratulations on surviving the pandemic, because that wasn't a given a few years
stayed
ago.
open.
So yeah, can you go over the history and whatever amount of detail you'd like?
Sure. Yeah. So the history is so interesting because, not a lot of it is like written down per se, so I'm still learning, all these bits and pieces and how it was all connected, and different things, but
it's lore.
Yeah, it really is. I might be getting things wrong, but this is the best I got so far.
There's no journalism here.
I'm sure people have different perspectives as well, but
sure.
From my understanding, like a lot of it goes back to, like even like the summer of '69, people are starting to arrive in San Francisco and there's people that are hungry, we have to eat food. And there was, neighborhood folks and Haight specifically who were making relationships with local organic farmers and farm workers and, connecting the pieces around food access and how do people get fed, how do we have nourishing food, that's by the people, like for the people, that was kind of the motto.
Right.
And so they were able to put together like this neighborhood buying club. Okay. But then they were like, well, if we're the only one doing this, then we're only just replicating this inequity, this lack of access. So that was kind of what spilled into what was known as the food conspiracy.
Okay.
And that was, in the 60s and early 70s, where there was this amazing movement of community members, neighborhoods, organizing themselves in, in food buying clubs. So, coalesced group in a block or something would get together once a week and they would share a meal. They would place orders, pick up the food that was delivered and place orders for the next week of, the supplies that they would need. And they had it all organized just people to people. And, their slogan was, if you can't walk to food conspiracy, it's time to start another food conspiracy.
Oh, yeah.
So these were just propping up all over the place, and it was a beautiful thing. And
who were they buying from, or I guess who all?
Right, I think that exactly who I can't answer, but
generally,
I would say like local producers in and around the Bay Area, and even going up, the coastline.
Okay.
My dad actually, I remember he told me he worked. Trucking organic produce up and down the coast, like from Oregon down to California and back. Yeah. But so in the like early 70s also, there was kind of an economic shift and a wave of evictions that kind of disrupted and uprooted a little bit of these like community neighborhood buying clubs.
Were they sort of all over the Bay Area?
Yeah, from my understanding, they kind of spread mostly in San Francisco, but I think way past, into the East Bay in different ways.
Right. That would make sense.
And so, so after that kind of disruption, there was definitely a need to transform the way that it was working into more of like a brick and mortar situation.
Okay.
And so that's where the People's Food System was born out of, and that's where Other Avenues comes in.
Okay.
So Other Avenues, Rainbow Grocery, Veritable Vegetable, which is a distribution, and many other worker-owned co-ops that sadly no longer exist anymore.
Many don't, but some do.
But have been, replaced, by other worker-owned co-ops in a way. We're working together at that point to, all food things. So it was like food co-ops, like stores, distribution, warehouses, chef buying clubs, like you name it. Everybody had a role, and they also were putting a lot of effort into, governing themselves in a radical, democratic way.
Just rethinking all the systems top to bottom.
Right, and trying to form
including the top to bottom systems. Like hierarchies. Yeah. Let's rethink that.
And so when we started, we actually were completely volunteer ran. So a lot of, these systems relied on volunteers. And originally we were across the street, not just like next to where Trouble Coffee was or something. But not long, I think we moved over into this building and then got the other side of the building.
I wonder if Celia's was already there. Because that would be like quite a contrast. I love Celia's, but I'm like, boom, that's way different.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway. But I know that like it was not uncommon for there to be like signs on the window that said, "Sorry, we couldn't open up today."
Right.
You know, our volunteers didn't show up.
The messiness of doing things that way.
Yeah.
Which also I think speaks to like the artificiality of always open.
Right.
Someone's probably suffering.
Right.
If that's the case, right?
Yeah, you know.
Or being overworked or
potentially,
exploited.
If you don't have a good system where the workers are able to create boundaries for themselves.
Correct. Correct. Very important.
Yeah. So eventually the co-op, after, running volunteer for a while, it became a hybrid, because the community, this is like a community store, right? Mm-hmm. Like the community, without the community, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
In many different ways. And it transitioned into like a hybrid worker-owned but community-owned, kind of like consumer-owned model of sorts.
Like a membership kind of thing? Or
like the shoppers had, a role in decision-making.
Oh, okay.
Right. To a certain extent. And I don't exactly know how that all functioned, meeting-wise and things like that, but it was a kind of a hybrid situation. And I think that was, I should get that date correctly, 1989, I believe.
Oh, okay.
So 74 we opened.
The doors opened in 74, so about 15 or so years
1987,
later.
my bad.
13 years.
Yeah, 1987 became a hybrid consumer co-op, and in 1999 we became a worker-owned co-op. Fully worker-owned, yeah.
So that model, the hybrid model, was experimented with for roughly a decade or so, and then do you know the decision-making behind going?
Yeah, I don't know all of the details, but I think that ultimately, power dynamics is a thing that always has to be like watched, and I would say that there's still even some power dynamics,
sure,
that you
have
human. To name them, and work through them.
Right.
But this is just me making assumptions here,
Sure.
fully, like I'm assuming that model, like, because of the way the store was originally ran as like volunteers and the people who are like really doing the work, like I would say that the store was always ran with a worker-owned kind of mindset,
Right.
But yeah, so I think just by that time it probably made sense to fully move into a worker-owned, even though the community like is still part of the community,
Right.
Honestly, there's been times where we almost had to close the doors, and the community like had loans we were able to take and pay them back even before they were due. We were able to buy the building
nice.
Because of that. We were still paying the bank,
that is huge.
but in theory. And even before that, one of the volunteers who worked here had bought the building when it was going to be sold to an architect who wanted to like double the rent.
Oh, wow.
But the way that the rent was structured was like a percentage of sales, so we always knew that we would be able to pay the rent.
Okay.
Because it was relative to how much income we were having,
right?
Which was great.
Yeah, that's
system.
important.
So there's always been a community effort, around how things have been working, and then I don't know what year we like officially bought the building, but.
That's okay.
Yeah.
But the model of worker ownership, which you said 99 or so,
yeah,
I mean,
legally.
That's right around half of the entire life of the store. So I think it's significant that of all the different things that have been tried, this is the one that has, at least up to now, has stuck.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, I think it shows, so we're worker owned. There's currently right now 18 of us. We consolidated. We were like 19 when I started. We may go back to 19,
Did two people become one?
Basically, one person left, and we were like, oh, sales are down after the pandemic. Like, maybe we can tighten up a little bit, But, we also have people on parental leave now. Like, it's an ebb and flow, You don't want people to get burnt out. Sure. But you also want there to be enough resources to go around so people can, raise their families and do things that they wish to do.
Live their lives.
Exactly.
Well, for me, another sort of theme here or idea is that this is not radical. You know, a lot of people might not think about these things. They go to work, they shop, but the idea of any business, this can be replicated. Like this is like Other Avenues. There are other examples as well. Show that this is not far-fetched.
Right. I mean, yeah, and there's some great resources for transitioning workplaces. I would say the U.S. Federation of Worker Co-ops has a lot of great resources that they're expanding to support businesses in transitioning into worker-owned.
Awesome.
And yeah, I mean, I think worker-owned, you know, to a certain extent, you know, even makes unions obsolete. You know, arguably, there's different types of unions and there's different ways to weave it all together.
Right.
But if you're not negotiating with a boss, you're negotiating with each other. You know?
It's already kind of built in.
Exactly. Yeah, and I mean, so I should say also a unique way around how we make decisions too, or maybe not so unique, but we actually run on a consensus model.
Okay.
So that means that everyone has to agree also for anything to pass. One person can block an item, and even if there's several people that are not feeling it, you know, have reservations or feel like they might stand aside, then if there's enough folks that feel that way, then there also isn't consensus, and a vote wouldn't go through, you know. So it really does take, you know, having strong relationships with each other and being able to communicate your ideas.
I was gonna say to sell. Is that weird to say? To sell your ideas. That's it, right?
Yeah, right.
Around conversations and advocacy, right?
Yeah, and receive feedback. I think that's the biggest part. Right, exactly.
To other people.
There's different perspectives in the room and they're all valuable, you know? And that's why I personally really like this form of work, because I work a lot better collaboratively, you know? Like, I don't assume that I have the best idea, you know what I mean? Or that my idea is perfect the way that I've conjured it, you know? And so I rely on everyone else's, you know, understanding to see if is it relatable, is it impactful, is it meaningful? And this, you know, kind of work system really supports that and encourages that, you know?
Again, not a radical idea, at least to my mind. I mean, I'm sort of steeped in, you know, 30 plus years of alternative thinking.
Right.
So, but really, I think the point is, it's not far-fetched. I already said it, but it's like these systems of cooperation and collaboration. These models work.
They do work, yeah. And I mean, it
depends on what your motivations are.
That's true,
right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, that is a really important point, right? Is like, why are we here, you know? And I think that's a conversation that cannot be overlooked and has to continue to be maintained, to be had, right? Because, you know, we start with these moment in time, you know, where there's a need and people are coming together around it, you know, and then things shift, and it's important to remind ourselves like why we're here, you know, because otherwise we become too rigid, or we form, you know, fall into the space that is given to us to fall, when really the goal is to like expand and change the way that we're thinking and engaging with each other as society, you know? Right. So, I mean, even with that, I feel like co-ops are a good tool within a set of tools, because they allow us to have more autonomy and agency in our workspace, but to a certain extent, you know, they're still operating within capitalism, you know, so there's more to think about there too, you know, where like potentially maybe they can only take us so far, you know, and that but through these practices of working within community, having, you know, discussion and dialogue and, you know, consensus practices, we can work through, you know, where we need to be continuing to aim, you know?
Next week on the podcast, we'll hear more from Celia, one of several worker owners at Other Avenues Grocery Cooperative. Please join us next Tuesday for part 2. Music for Storied San Francisco was produced, performed, and curated by Otis McDonald. Michelle Kilfeather does original photography for us. Aaron Lim of Bitch Talk Podcast is our contributing producer. And the show is produced and hosted by me, Jeff Hunt. Now in our 5th season, we have more than 200 episodes available on our website, storiedsf.com, or wherever you listen to podcasts. If you're able to, please rate and review the show. And drop us a line at storiedsf@gmail.com. Thanks for listening. Stay strong, weird, and healthy. And we'll see you next time on Storied San Francisco.
This podcast is a proud member of the BFF.FM podcast network. Learn more at podcasts.bff.fm.
BFF.FM, best frequencies forever.